the military command decided to withdraw a few meters. You're a military journalist, you know what I'm talking about. They withdrew into the forest to save the people, to save them from the unnecessary losses.
Then the Ukrainian forces entered this territory around 1,200 long, and I don't know why they're doing this. They are pushing their people, and these people are going to be killed. And Ukrainian military say that this is the road, one-way road.
Going to the front lines, because I think they had about 80 people there at a time, and they have to use boats, but the boats are constantly shelled and attacked by drones and other weapons. And we have 2, 3, or 6 people wounded, while the enemy has dozens of people dead. So they found themselves in a cul-de-sac, and they are only throwing people into battle for political reasons. And so this probably has to do with Ukrainian leaders' trips to Western countries to beg for money for the country's economy to be sustained and to sustain the military. So that's their approach. They're going around asking for money, and as long as they're doing that, they have to show that their army is capable of delivering some kind of result, despite any costs it may entail. But they're being beaten up. And of course, they could make bridges, but they understand that those bridges will be destroyed immediately. So this is not just people who serve in the Ukrainian army. Those are the military elite, the assault troops. And if we count the statistics, the losses of the last 6 weeks, we will see how sensitive these losses are, how tangible they are. So I think this is foolishness and lack of responsibility on the part of the Ukrainian political leadership, but that is their business. So, some time ago, I said, don't be too quick. Let them supply their troops to that point. Sadly, that is the logic of war. But they are still sending troops there, and that's a tragedy for them. But both the minister and the head of the general staff said that they will slowly reduce their space of maneuvering, and I think this will come to an end. So, as to the situation on the front lines in general, this is something you asked about, but you're an expert on that yourself. Sometimes I look at you, especially the girls, running around and on the front lines. This really makes your heart jump. But we should tell the TV people that they take care of you, because that's dangerous out there. So, along the entire line of contact, our forces are improving their situation, and almost all of them are taking active action. So this is how it is along the entire line of contact. So now, as to the future of the new regions, there are many questions. We're receiving lots of questions both from the new regions and from other parts of Russia. So what will we see going forward? Annually, we have over 1 trillion rubles in the national budget to ensure the development of these regions and their integration into the economic and social space of the Russian Federation. And in other regions, we're seeing the situation improve at a much quicker pace, because in Crimea, for example, the former authorities did not pay too much attention to these issues. But this money will be invested and is already being invested. And we also have regions partnering with the new regions. I think other regions have already invested about 150 billion rubles, and these regions also plan to invest 100 billion more. And this year, these so-called new regions brought the federal budget 170 billion rubles. This means that the economy in these regions is being restored and life is going back to normal, and a lot is still to be done, and we will do that. Now, as we're live, we have some technical issues. You saw the question from the VGTRK correspondent. Well, I see a colleague from Turkey. Let's ask what his question is. Okay, but then we'll go back to the military correspondents. Of course. Yes, and there are women among them. Mr. President, the results of Israel's attacks in Gaza are that every 6 or 7 minutes one child dies. 8,000 Palestinian children have already died, and over 6,000 women. But so at this point, Palestine is dying, and the major countries of the world are incapable of stopping these attacks. Do you think the United Nations has lost its utility? And are there any coordinated efforts between Turkey and Russia to ensure peace in the region? And what plans does Moscow have with Ankara on international and regional issues? Are you planning a visit to Turkey in the near future? Yes, well, as I look at what's happening in Gaza, now, I will give a general assessment. I agree with what you're saying, but we need to note a leading role of President Erdogan in restoring, normalizing the situation in Gaza. He's one of the few people in the international community who place emphasis on the tragedy and who are contributing to improve the situation and trying to ensure a lasting peace. So he's very effective in this work, and I wish him all kinds of success, because what's happening is a disaster. And I think we will be coming back to the Ukrainian crisis after this, but everyone here and in the entire world know and see what's happening in Gaza and what's happening during the special military operation in Ukraine. This is not similar at all. You've mentioned the death of thousands of children and women, but the UN Secretary General said that Gaza today is the biggest child cemetery in the world. So this is a very eloquent assessment, and it is objective. But as to the UN's role, this is not surprising. This is something I've talked about. And we saw this during the Cold War as well, when some forces, when some states blocked solutions promoted by other states. But the United Nations was created in such a way that would enable consensus and consensus seeking. And if there is no consensus, no decisions can be made. So this is not unusual for the UN. This is how it always has been, especially during the Cold War. So the Soviet Foreign Minister Gromyko was called Mr. No, because he often vetoed decisions adopted by the UN. And there is a deep meaning in this, because if a country sees an action as hostile, it may prevent this from happening. And this is the mechanism that makes the UN effective. Otherwise, it will turn into a talking shop. And this was how it was in the period after the First World War. But that doesn't mean that we shouldn't be looking for consensus. Just as Turkey, we assume that we must implement the UN decision on the creation of a Palestine state with its capital in East Jerusalem. This is the foundation for a possible settlement between Israel and Palestine. Now, as to our plans, we are in constant contact with President Erdogan on these issues, and we have a very similar stance, and I hope that we will have the opportunity to meet soon. And I think that this is no secret that President Erdogan had it in his plans, but our schedules didn't match. So it was a scheduling problem on their side. I would be willing, but I think early next year we will be able to meet. And as to the efforts that are being undertaken, as you know, I recently visited the Arab countries. I consulted our friends in Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates. So the top importance is that we must save the people in Gaza, and we must provide a massive humanitarian aid. Now, when I was in the Emirates, we learned that they had created in Gaza, not far from the Rafah checkpoint, they had opened a field hospital there. And we discussed the possibility of Russia opening a field hospital and a stadium. But to make that possible, we would need the consent of Egypt and Israel. And I talked to the president of Egypt, and he supported the idea. I talked to Prime Minister Netanyahu. We consulted with various security agencies, and Israel thinks that opening a Russian hospital in Gaza would not be safe. But it doesn't mean that we will abandon these efforts. If this is not safe at the moment and is not supported by Israel now, we still have our agreements with Israel. We have agreed that they will increase supplies of medical equipment and medical supplies, and this is something that they will do. So we are in touch with all the sides in the conflict. Now, as to women war correspondents, we've contacted Valentina Solovyova of Channel 1, who is in Zaporozhye region again. Good afternoon. We're in the Melitopol cancer clinic. This is one of the...
We have 3 beds here and 6 more beds in here. The chief physician of this hospital, Konstantin Lakunin, Mr. Lakunin, we see that there are a lot of patients. What is the situation with the doctors? Well, we have a lot of patients, but we have a shortage of doctors, like across entire Russia, but maybe the situation is even more dramatic. Here we are missing oncologists, children oncologists. It's not just shortage of them, there are none of them. So we have to assume all these functions. I would like to thank the federal research centers who are helping out from the clinical point of view, methodological point of view, and they are admitting our patients to their centers. How many patients are there per one doctor? At outpatient clinics, there are some 50, 60 patients per day, while the norm is 30 patients, so it's double that. And the same is at the hospital. We have at least 20 patients with cancer patients per one doctor. But still, I can see that you're receiving medical equipment. Yes, we are renovating our operating room. We are going to equip it. We have already received the equipment. That's the operating table for the new operating rooms. So I'm sure that we are going to be successful in the future. But the matter of medical staff is a acute issue for you. Well, the question is about special federal program to attract staff, medical professionals to the new regions, to the new territories. Maybe there will be some apartments allocated for them, and maybe some subsidized mortgage loans or allocation of lots of land. But somehow medical professionals should be attracted here. What about salaries? Well, salaries are quite competitive. And actually, medical professionals are traveling here. I cannot say that we are not getting any, but still these measures are not enough. Thank you. So this is the question. Well, I understand the question. But when the doctor said that we have a shortage of medical professionals, of doctors, like across Russia, quote unquote, so they perceive their region as part of Russia. And from this point of view, I would like to emphasize this question. Well, I understand the issue and this suggestion to establish a special federal program that would help to buy apartments, buy real estate. I don't know whether a special program is necessary, but that's something that we should pay attention to. We have subsidized mortgage loans for these regions with the interest rate of 2%, so it's a very good interest rate, even better interest rate than for the families with children. But from what I understand, the problem here is that this subsidy only works with new residential buildings. And to put it mildly, we do not have a lot of new real estate there. And we should cover the secondary real estate as well as we are doing currently in the Far East. And we should expedite this effort, which should start as soon as possible. And secondly, as for the additional stimuli, well, if salaries are big enough, as the doctor said, then so Shumbrat in Moldovan is thank you. Hello, I'm sorry. Shumbrat is in Moldovan is hello. I will take your question soon. So what needs to be done? I guess, as in the Far East, we need to raise the signing fee for doctors to make it 2 million rubles, and for other medical professionals to raise it to 1 million rubles. So it could be good stimulus for them, good motivation for them to travel. So the budget has already been calculated, but maybe we can make the decision in the nearest future. So let's take the question from Mordovia, a lady in red. Let's hear it from her. Anastasia Vidyaeva from the Russian TV state company from Mordovia. I represent our multi-ethnic republic. I would like to invite you to our pavilion at the Russia Expo. First of all, I would like to thank you for this idea. What kind of feedback are we getting? Recently, we have surveyed people, and 97% of Russians are proud after they visited this expo. And regions, too, have a lot to be proud of. In Mordovia, we have innovation, industrial facilities, the import substitution. We are making pharmaceuticals and cables and our trademark, our oak, and we are making really beautiful things out of it. And this expo is not just a chance to see these beautiful things, these crafts and arts that we have in the Republic, but it also helps to resolve various issues of the business society, to resolve various matters, and that's why I'm inviting you, and we would really love to see you there. Before the new year, every girl, even an adult girl, dreams about miracles, so I hope that you will accept our invitation. Thank you for the invitation. Mordovia is a beautiful republic. I really like the way people treat their traditions, their culture in all its manifestations. I mean, clothing, attires, and traditions in a wider sense of the word. As for the regions and as for the Expo, the regional part of the Expo, yes, it was a success. The regional exhibition on VDNH are very interesting for everyone to attend to, and thank you. I will try to visit your visit. One more question from the media. Match TV, I guess a question about sport, judging from the network you're coming from. Yes, Mary Kober, Match Television Network, a question about sports, and we have a lot to discuss. IOC introduced very strict measures on the admission of Russian athletes for the Olympic Games for 2024, and there are no restrictions for the Israeli athletes, for example. So should one travel to the Olympic Games under these circumstances, and what kind of situation do we have with professional sport here in Russia? And we are receiving a lot of questions from the regions because the situation is difficult, the times are dire. Are we going to go on with the program of the development of grassroots sports and of the physical education in the country? And before you will answer, you are a man of sports yourself, and you said that judo was your first passion. And we have a lot of questions from the parents, from the coaches, even from the children themselves, who are saying that there is a huge will to participate in competition, to compete, but they have no conditions to train, to practice. So let's look at the video message from Crimea. Mr. President, we are addressing you from Solnechna Dolina, from Sudak. We traveled to a lot of competitions, all Russian competitions, regional competitions. We always won prizes and awards and medals. But this year it became impossible to train at the gym that we have, because this gym is more than 40 years old. The windows are broken, and there are a lot of other issues. Our coaches were trying to go to the authorities, but local authorities and regional authorities, they ignored all the requests that we were making. So we are addressing you now. Please help us to renovate the gym. And we would like to become true defenders of our homeland in the future. We wish you every success. We wish you every victory. I will answer this question, obviously, as for the decision made by the IOC and this comparison with other athletes, with the Israeli athletes and so on. Well, firstly, everything that international dignitaries are doing with the Russian sports, that's just a perversion of the idea Baron de Coubertin suggested. sport, you are the world. So the Olympic Games were supposed to bring people together, not to divide the people. And the modern officials, dignitaries from the Olympic movement, they got carried away with the business part of the Olympic movement. So they are largely dependent on the sponsors now. And the sponsors, they are looking at how much is 1 minute of advertisement time on the television and so on. And they have a lot of their internal issues as well. If they go on working like that, they will bring the Olympic movement to an end, because the very idea is going through dire times now. It's suffering. And you mentioned the Israeli athletes, despite the situation in Gaza. If I supported this statement somehow, then I would be like one of those sport officials. But sport has nothing to do with politics. Sport should bring people together. And like we say, don't count money in someone else's pocket. I think the same situation is here. It's improper. It's wrong to look at someone else. Yes, they have their own issues, like we were saying with your Turkish counterpart. But athletes have nothing to do with that. They can travel and compete without any restrictions. And the same thing should be done in relation to Russia. But this is not happening. And under the influence of the Western political elites, they are making decisions that are advantageous to them, but not advantageous to the world sport. Like the European politicians are making decisions that are beneficial for the United States economy, but not for the European economy. The same situation is in here, but in different field. Whether they should travel to the Olympic Games or not, well, we should look closely at those conditions. Well, the flag, the anthem. I have always said that athletes, they train for years, and they should be given this opportunity to compete at the major events, including the Olympic Games. Everyone knows. Well, it doesn't matter if they show this flag or not. Everyone knows that this athlete comes from Russia. This is self-evident. That's why I has always supported it, that our athletes travel to these competitions and competed at these events. But we need to analyze more closely now what kind of conditions the IOC is coming up with. If these artificial conditions are politically motivated, if they are aimed at trying to stop our leaders, best athletes, from traveling to the Olympic Games, to stop those athletes who can win medals at the Olympic Games, to drain blood, so to say, from our national teams, well, then the athletes from CSKA won't be able to travel from Dynamo, because allegedly they have something to do with the armed forces or with the law enforcement agencies, even though today's CSKA has nothing to do with the armed forces, but they can invent any kind of things. If that's the goal, if they want to stop our leaders from traveling there and they would like to show that Russian sports is not prospering or it's dying out, then we need the Sports Ministry and the National Olympic Committee of Russia. So they should analyze this and they should make a balanced decision.
And Mr. Putin, you promised our guys in Crimea to have a word. Well, yes, I want to address them and tell them that we must develop sport and all the programs that we have. And in recent years, we had about 1.5 billion or even more, 1.7 billion allocated from the federal budget to develop regional and municipal sports. This year it's less than 700 billion. We need to go back to the practice of funding these initiatives, and this will be included in the presidential program that I will have. And as to Crimea, I will talk to the head of the region, and the federal level will provide support, and we will solve this problem in a targeted manner. Yes, we have letters from two men. They're talking about hockey and other sports. This is a relevant topic. Well, the Russian National Front will be processing all these letters over the next year. I think we have a Dmitry Kulko here, and it's unusual to see him in a suit, as he is a war correspondent. Please give him the mic. Dmitry Kulko, war correspondent with Channel 1. If I may, have several questions from fighters in the war zone. First, do you think the system for payments to military people is now functioning smoothly? Could it be made better? I know people who haven't received money for several months. The second question is about the wounded, about the Defenders of the Fatherland fund that was created to support families of people killed in actions and veterans. So what is your assessment of the work of this fund? And if I may propose an idea, the people who have been wounded now have to go back to their military unit after they go out of hospital. Even if they were gravely wounded, even if they lost legs or arms, they have to go back to the war zone, to their unit to pass medical examination there on the spot. So maybe it would be better if they could pass the examination in the hospital. And now the next question is about drones. There is still a shortage of UAVs in the army, and we are collecting funds to buy additional drones, but still there is not enough. And recently we raised funds with the Russian National Front, and we acquired dozens of drones, and several months have passed, but all of them have been already used because it's disposable materials. But despite the rain, despite all the difficulties, our guys are still fighting there, and they need reconnaissance, they need these drones. So when will the situation improve? Well, I think you must see that the situation is getting better. Please tell me that this is true. Yes, it is getting better at a certain pace. Yes, and that's a fact. But you're right. We don't always have enough, and it doesn't always work as planned. So please sit down. So the front line is almost 2,000 kilometers long. That's quite a lot. And it is obvious that not everything will be supplied in sufficient quantities everywhere. But we also have domestic production being developed, and we are acquiring drones abroad, and the Minister of Defense and our industry are working. You know, the REB system, and you know our developments in radio electronic warfare and others. You know, the vehicles that are being supplied, the production is being expanded. So this will improve. And it's very good to see that the National Front is working, that the organization is operating to support those who are fighting now. And, of course, we could do without the support if we had to, but when people have started supporting their comrades, it's impossible to stop them, and we're very grateful for that. Over 10 billion rubles have been donated, and now, of course, the state has the funds to do this now, especially now. But the fact that people are doing this, that grandmothers are knitting warm clothes. 3 million letters have been sent to soldiers by supporters, and this is really heartwarming, and we will support these initiatives. And we're deeply grateful to all the volunteers, to everyone who supports our fighters. Now, of course, there are places where things don't work out as they should, and as a military correspondent, you have some role of oversight, and I hope that we will be in contact and that you will work with the Minister of Defense as well. Now, as to the fact that people have to go back to their unit from the hospital for the formalities, I saw people mention this in the letters, but I think the situation has changed. So maybe we have old data, you and I, but as the Minister of Defense has told me, this can now be done, but not in the hospital, but in the rehabilitation center, because people are being sent to rehabilitation centers after the hospital. And I'm being told that the process is operational, but maybe they're still making preparations, but I'm told that it's already operational, that they provide assistance with the formalities and with acquiring accommodation and all of that. But I will discuss this with the Minister of Defense, because if something is not right, this should be fixed. And as to the Defenders of the Fatherland Support Fund, this is a very good thing. I met with some people from the regions that are involved in its work. They're magnificent people that are truly engaged, and they're very enthusiastic, but they don't always have all the necessary powers. The documents are worded in a way that they're not directly involved. But I think that they should have increased powers in supervising how much is being allocated, to what purpose, and what results it brings. And I won't go into too much detail, but I know that some State Duma deputies also took up this issue after I visited one of the branches of the fund, and we will keep working to improve the fund's operations, to make it an effective tool to protect and provide security to our people.
You have already mentioned the role of the volunteers, of how big their hearts are, but you know, Marina Makeeva from the Moscow region is wondering, today the people are actively helping the soldiers from the special military operation with the transport, with the commodities, but why are common people doing that, not the state? Well, I have just answered that. The state is also involved in that. The state is doing 99.9% of the effort is with the state, but people are doing it from their bottom of their hearts, and we are not going to restrict this effort. I can only thank them for that. And you've mentioned the jammers, and a paratrooper from the Omsk region is asking to send more jammers. Well, we will check it. Maybe there is a shortage of jammers somewhere, and at some point, in some unit, there could be a shortage of the jammers, because the front line is more than 2,000 kilometers long, and in the area of hostilities, there are 617,000 troops, just 617,000. So yes, sometimes there could be some shortages, but if there is any precise information, please pass it on to us, hand it over to us, and the war correspondents that I have meetings with them regularly, and we will look into that. And let's go back to the question from the Novosibirsk region. I'm Sergei Sobolev. In 2022, I signed a contract with a private military company for 6 months. After I returned home, I went to the military commissariat to receive the war veteran ID, but I was denied. And then I went to the foundation, and I was denied there. And then I went to the social support of the Iskatim town. I was denied to receive this ID there. please help me with this situation, since the majority of my brother-in-arms, they also served in this private military company. And we are getting a lot of questions like this. You know, the problem does exist. And I think that these gaps, these blank spots, they shouldn't have been allowed by the defense ministry. So what is the problem then? That from the formal point of view, from the legal point of view, there are no private military companies in Russia. There is no legislation for them. That's the problem. Secondly, contracts with war veterans who served in these quote-unquote private military companies, they have not signed contracts with the state. That's the gist of the issue. The commanders of these private military companies had legal relations with the state, and the payments were made in cash. And that's the problem as well. It's really hard to establish, even to receive the lists of these military companies. And all the people, I know these people personally, and I have
like
close
some
friends,
of the
close contacts,
children of my
and
acquaintances.
children of my close friends were in these private military companies. And among those people who are around me, who work with me,
of the private military groups, and without a doubt, their rights should be and must be reinstated. They are eligible to receive all the social benefits, allowances, and all other forms of support granted to other participants of the hostilities. This is my categoric stance. I will not go into detail, but this must be done, and the Defense Ministry knows that, as well as the government. If need be, or probably necessarily, we would have to amend the legislation, and this will be done, and I promise we will do our best. I'll go to great lengths. Now let's call, I can see some running line. One of them has been saying, Yelpatyevo, Yaroslav region, please provide gas supplies. We'll have a look at that. Probably we'll come back to that later, and we may speak about the gasification and Yelpatyevo settlement in Yaroslav region. And now we'll have a video call out to the village of Beriozovo. Can you hear us? Good afternoon. I'm a service person now situated in Lugansk. Junior Sergeant Yulia Berezova. I always wanted to end up in Donbass as a volunteer. On the 10th of May of 2022, I subscribed the Voluntary Mobilization Act, and I was ascribed to a regiment for the sake of defending our homeland and for the sake of justice. But I was mobilized in the Donetsk People's Republics, not Russia. But I wanted to have all the benefits on site of my domicile, and I have a certificate of a participant of hostilities in Donetsk Republic, and it's valid only in that republic. And in the federal database, my serial number, my personal number, is inexistent. So we are not represented. We are invisible for the nationwide system. Thank you for your question. You were recruited by the people's militia of Donetsk People's Republic that are on the front line, on the contact line, participating in the hostilities. And indeed, the issue is that those who signed contracts when Lugansk and Donetsk People's Republics were not part of the Russian Federation are now in trouble. And the issue is quite relevant. Well, the junior sergeant is a Russian national, I know, and it's especially relevant for those who were not citizens of Russia. Now, the papers that you have make you eligible for benefits in Donetsk and Lugansk People's Republics. These papers may be rendered valid on Russian soil. There is a procedure for that. Or you may receive a brand new package of documents on behalf of the Russian Federation. Now, a commission has been established in Donetsk and Luhansk People's Republics. They already operate.
And I believe that there have been about 4,500 people who have confirmed their rights. In the Lugansk People's Republic, there was 17,500 people who also confirmed their rights. And in Donetsk, they have already issued the relevant certificates and IDs. A few thousand of them, in fact. And the same goes for the Lugansk People's Republic. 1,700 IDs have been issued. So we have already started moving along this path, and we will keep working to restore the rights and confirm the rights of the war veterans. There should be no doubt about that. If something is not done yet, rest assured we will do that and we will finish it. And if there are any difficulties that you're experiencing when addressing the Commission, you can just tell us and we will fix it. Let's get back to the journalists, if I may. There's a young man next. Wait, let's move to the north. There's a question there. Mr. President, good afternoon. Republic Komi, Dareshchanina, the capital Panorama, and member of the civil chamber of our region. This is a question that the people of the Northern Territories entitled me to ask. You know that, unfortunately, all over the country, not only in our region, it takes quite a long time to implement a very important part of the program of the relocation of the people of the far north. We have 6 localities like that in the Republic of Komi. These are the people who have given their lives for the economic development of the north, and now they wish they could spend their retirement in territories with a more moderate climate. A few figures. This year, our republic received 129 housing certificates from the state, but there are 21,000 people still in line for the certificates. I'm not asking you to give certificates to all the people, but I see 2 options here. The first option is prioritize 2 categories of people, the disabled people and the retired people. These are the 2 categories who should be the priority. There are 2 options for them. Even though the federal budget is quite pressed for money, but still I would ask you to seek additional finance for next year. If that's too complicated, our region is ready to get a low-interest loan, and our authorities are ready to relocate the people of Irtim and Vorkuta, the people who live in these regions, to relocate them within the region, for example, to Syktyvkar or to the south of Komi, where the climate is also quite acceptable. Would it be possible to choose one of the 2 options, or perhaps there are any third options? And thank you once again for solving our question of giving the Vorkuta airport to the federal property status. Thank you for that. Yes, and it's important that the airport is developing. Sometimes we give it to the region, and then the region starts asking for federal money for development. Well, the Republican authorities are very active, and the governor was asking you about that, and all the decisions have been taken. Yes, I know that the governor is very active and has good connections. He used to work in the federal authorities, and I believe he is quite efficient in that. I would ask you to repeat your proposal. So, you're suggesting that we prioritize two categories of people, the disabled people and the retired people. And so we see two options for them. The first, the easiest option, is seeking additional financement from the federal budget. The second option that we would be capable of is relocating these people within our region of Komi, but that would need a low-interest loan from the federal budget to make sure we can solve their housing issues, either in Syktyvkar or in the south of Komi. The republic is big, and moving from the north to the south of the republic would also be a solution. You know, if we had a finance minister here, he would answer that we have no money, and the Minister of Finance never has any money for that. But still, we should seek a solution and seek the expansion of the program. I know that there are people who've been working their entire life in the north, or at least some period of their life, and now they would like to move somewhere south or to a region with a more moderate climate. Of course, we will continue this program, most importantly. And secondly, speaking of expanding the spending and the budget, well, the budget for next year has already been adopted. If we have any additional income, we will consider this. Speaking of the relocation within the region, I think that's quite possible. We will talk about this with the head of the republic and with the government. Giving out a loan is also not quite simple, but this might be a form of providing assistance to the region. This wouldn't be so pressing for the finance ministry, although it has certain difficulties for sure. But we will try to do that. And speaking of special priorities for the two categories, that's right. We will discuss that with the government. Thank you for your suggestion. Let us move on to that sector. The third row, a young man sitting over there raising his hand. Please introduce yourself. Vladimir Sirokov, RBC channel. A couple of questions about the currency. Recently, Javier Milei became the new president of Argentina, and one of his main proposals before the elections is to use the US dollar instead of the Argentinian peso. Russia, on the other hand, has recently been pursuing the policy of de-dollarization, not to use dollars and euros in international transactions. What do you think about the process, and how convenient is it for Russia to ensure transactions in rubles and the national currencies of the friendly states? And speaking of the Russian ruble, in your view, what are the factors mostly affecting the exchange rate of the ruble, its growth and increase and decrease? What is it reliant upon? Let us begin with Argentina, not to get back later to that. Yes, we are all aware of the idea of the president-elect of Argentina to use the US dollars within the country. This is a sovereign decision of each state. First of all, the inflation in Argentina is about 143%, and there are numerous problems. And even the previous authorities were talking about that they have issues with paying back the loans that had been issued to Argentina from various sources. So the logic here is clear. However, this would mean a significant loss of the national sovereignty. If the current Argentinian authorities see no other solution in this financial conundrum, the decision is up to them. However, this would mean a significant loss of their sovereignty. Now, the next point. There is also a social and economic component of such decisions. You're from the RBC channel. You specialize in these kinds of stuff. You're all specialists and experts. You'll know what I'm talking about, and the citizens will understand. There's nothing complicated in what I'm about to say. Even the use of the US dollar when calculating your national currency exchange rate may result in serious social and economic consequences. Back in the day, Argentina went through great turmoil relating to their finances and the banking issues. Now look what's going to happen if they only use the dollar, or if they directly link their national currency to the US dollar. They're trying to solve their domestic economic problems. And all governments are always taking into account their social obligations to the citizens. And by the way, I am satisfied to know that the Russian government is dealing with its obligation. Despite the rising expenses for the defense and security, we are fully compliant with all our obligations to the citizens, 100%. Some might say we're not doing enough and more should be done. We were talking to the Republic of Komi about the problems with relocation and so on. But the fact that the state is giving its promises and we stay true to our promises. Now, speaking of the US dollar, they have certain obligations. The retirement benefits, the state employee salaries, and so on and so forth. Generally, there is not enough money. So what would it mean if they started using the dollars? They have their national currency, the peso, and a tool to affect the inflation. That doesn't work perfectly, but still they have the means to balance the healthy economy and their social obligations. Now, if they switch to a foreign currency, they can't print their own money. There's only one way to deal with the inflation: to cut the social expenditure, to cut it everywhere, to cut the salaries, to cut the retirement benefits, the medical expenses, the road infrastructure, the security, and so on. There is no other way if they renounce their national currency. And any government taking such decisions would find itself in a very complicated situation from the point of view of domestic political stability. If they're ready for that, that's their sovereign right. The country is independent and they may take their own decisions. Speaking of us, you see, we're rejecting that. We're not. However, we've been experiencing problems with the transactions in foreign currencies. And by the way, they're shooting themselves in the leg by doing that. They are blocking our access to the US dollars and the euro as universal reserve global currencies. First of all, the US dollars. In 2021, if memory serves me right, we were servicing our exports and we were using 87% of foreign currencies in these transactions. So the US dollars and the euros. The ruble only accounted for 11 or 13%. And the Chinese yuan accounted for 0.4%. As of September this year, the figures are as follows. The rubles accounts for 40%. The yuan accounts for 33%. The overall use of the US dollar and the euro is 24%. It went down from 87 to 24. Why did they do this? They shot themselves in the leg. Is it bad for us? No, it's not. The more we use the national currencies in our economic transactions, the better for us. This increases our sovereignty and our opportunities. So, what defines the exchange rate? The exchange rate depends on the market conditions, on the price on our export goods, and it relies on the domestic consumption and domestic demand, which is growing. There is also one more aspect. By the way, There was a decree that was meant to regulate the exchange rate situation, and it also played its own role and made the contribution. What was this about? In the previous years, it didn't take any restrictions. We used to have enough information from the countries that were receiving the majority of our exports, and it was clear for us where the capital is moving.
Now we do not receive any information. They closed everything for us. The government and the central bank do not see what is happening with the finances that our experts,
money that they are making, and the central bank and the government, well, rightfully decided to see what's happening, where this money is going. So there are elements of control that are being implemented, but all that's happening is temporary. And overall, the situation in the financial markets is stable. But critically, what's critical here is to make sure that it's predictable and it's stable. And this is the goal that we are carrying out, that we are reaching. Let's hear from that sector now. Or let's go to Kuban. There's a lot. My name is Maxim Zhmutsky, Krasnodarsk, the Krasnodarsk region. Mr. President, this year, Kuban resorts has set a new record. 17.5 million tourists have came to our region this year, and now is the winter period. This puts a colossal strain on the infrastructure, on our airports and roads. Mr. President, on the federal level, are we planning to improve the transport accessibility of the south of our country, maybe new railroads, new roads? And just a couple of days ago, there was information that on the 15th of December, or tomorrow, Moscow will hold a test flight from Moscow to Krasnodar. And if everything goes well, then our Krasnodar airport will be open. Can you comment on that? Yes, as to opening new airports, the main criterion here is, of course, security of the passengers. That is a priority for us when addressing issues such as launching new airports, opening new airports, including in Krasnodar. But this is close to the zone of military activity, so such decisions are made with the consultation or with the defense ministry. As to the development of new communication lines, new roads, air travel, railway travel, etc., all of that is developing. You mentioned the high-speed road, which is, of course, currently being developed. First, Moscow to St. Petersburg, then other destinations. We're thinking about that, but currently our main goal is to create an effective, strong government body that would be able to prepare a business plan for development. All of that is possible, and the government and those involved, those who initiated this process, companies such as Sberbank, bodies such as the Moscow government, all of them are involved in this project. Now, if we have a train that goes from Moscow to St. Petersburg in 2.5 hours, in Moscow some people commute for longer periods. That would be just a new step in a great direction. And when it comes to Krasnodar and to Kuban, to Stavropol region, to the Rostov region, communications with those areas, with the Crimea, we hopefully will be going towards those directions as well. And as for transportation and passenger flow, the flow is increasing. Passenger transportation when it comes to air traffic, air transportation is record high this year. Next comes railway transportation. It added 10% more of passenger flow. Then bus transportation plus 5 or 6 or maybe 4%. Now the volume of passenger traffic has significantly increased, and naturally all those involved in that process, in that sector, must prepare for the coming tourist season and make sure that people's demands are met. The tourist industry is developing by great leaps, and I'd like to thank everyone involved in this sector, including those working in the Kuban. I hope that they will keep on working, keep showing us as great a result as they do. Now let's go to this row. We have live the first row. Yes, my name is Alexander Yunishev, live. This is a difficult time, Mr. President. We have military correspondents among us here, and I'd like to say that our laws, including criminal laws, were written, some of them in the 90s, and in some cases people get very different years in prison for different acts, for killing a person. And I'm not trying to say that someone is innocent, but when we see that people who committed some minor crimes are getting very long sentences, maybe we should change things, because there are actual threats that must be punished, and there is witch hunting. Well, what are you saying? What do you mean, witch hunt? What did this person you mentioned do to receive, to being subject to witch hunts? What did she do to be hunted? Nobody's hunting her. All legal experts know the saying, dura lex sed lex. So when you say things like these, and I hear people getting 14 or 15 years sentences for economic crimes, this kind of baffles me at first. When I hear about that, it seems too much. And in many countries, economic crime, tax evasion, tax crimes, anti-monopoly crimes, or some cartel activity, some monopolies activities, people are receiving dozens, if not hundreds of years of prison time. Now, why does that happen? Because at some time, at some point in the development of a society, of an economy, the seriousness, the threat of posed by these crimes is so significant, it's so great, that it requires very strict punishment. So, to me personally, to be frank, I'm sometimes question decisions like these when a person is put in prison for 14 years for an economic crime. Well, like an ex-minister was jailed for 19 years. So what he did, or what that woman you mentioned did, those are bad things, but do they require a 14 or a 19-year-old year sentence? Well, we need to think about that. We need to think about laws, but as long as laws exist, we need to follow them. Remember the movie, the Belarus train station? The actor Papanov plays a young entrepreneur, and his boss is always asking him to go over some line to commit a crime, and Papanov saying to him, maybe you are right that we should neglect that law, but as long as it exists, maybe you should do it and go and change the laws. So that only shows us that a legal system must be stable, and the society must understand how important certain things are, how we value this stability and the law. It doesn't mean that we need to just sit still and change nothing. I will ask our lawmakers and people in the State Duma to re-evaluate certain things. I agree with you on some points. Mr. President, we have been working live for almost 2 years, and as per tradition, I'd like to switch to something different. The people have been sending messages to us, like Yaroslav from St. Petersburg. He's saying our country and you personally are being... we're hearing very offensive things said towards us. Maybe this will change at some point, and what do you think will happen in the future? Will it change this rhetoric? Another question asks whether you play chess and whether you're planning to do this holidays, winter holidays. And one more question: what's your way to cope with stress? How do you maintain motivation? Do you play chess? And if you do, who did you play with last? And in the long winter holidays, what do you propose Russians to do? How should they celebrate these holidays? Now, you're asking what they're going to say about Russia in Germany's towns. Well, in Germany, in Europe, in the US, in different regions of the world, people, in fact, are thinking that we are doing everything right. We are not afraid to fight for our national interest without interfering with others' national interests. That's number one. Number two, we have a lot of people who support us throughout the world when it comes to defending traditional values. A huge number of people support us in that, and their number is growing. It's growing by leaps and bounds. And as for my ways of coping with stress, what helps me overcome these challenges, being under attack, it's my sense of duty that helps me. And I'm not trying to sound all high and mighty here. Over the years, I've taught myself to try and choose most important goals and then strive for those goals without paying heed to all the detractors or some small problems. Now, we need to choose a goal and move toward it. As for your question about chess and whether I play it, I asked a young acquaintance of mine recently to play a round of chess. He said yes. He asked him, "Do you think I win?" And he looks at me and he says immediately, "I doubt it." So that's why we need to constantly work on improving ourselves. Now, question about New Year holidays. Well, I personally believe that we need to concentrate more on our families, on coming together, on finding something to do together as a family, go to theater, go to sporting events, exhibitions, etc. It's very important that you spend holidays with your families. Now, we are seeing a lot of reaction from the public. We are now receiving calls from Crimea, from school children there. There's a lot of reaction that we are receiving, and also people are expecting a response to a question about growing prices. And this year, unfortunately, we are seeing a lot of people complaining about specific types of products becoming more expensive. And for example, Anatoly Samoylov complains about growing prices for eggs. They are saying whether golden hens are producing these eggs.
Good afternoon, dear Vladimir Putin, my beloved president. My name is Irina Kopova, and I would like to ask you about the following. 10 eggs retail in our region for 120 rubles or more. We have never seen prices like this. Chicken breasts used to be 165 rubles per kilo. Now it's 350. Chicken wings used to be 165, now it's 200 plus. Mr. President, please have mercy on pensioners. We do not receive millions in pension. Can you please see to that? Because we have nobody else to turn to. It's a pity that you only have an event like this once a year. You should be doing this 3 or more times a year. We really hope that you will help. So, dear Mrs. Irina, you said it's once a year, but trust me, just recently I was talking with the Minister of Agriculture and asking him about his situation with eggs. And I quote, I told him that our citizens had a problem. 40% hike in prices, in chicken egg prices, in poultry. And do you know what happened? I asked him. As I told you, there is a small, yet still, a rise in income. Demand has grown. And eggs used to be a relatively cheap source of protein. And I love myself some scrambled eggs. And sometimes I can consume up to 10 eggs, scrambled eggs, in the morning. The thing is that demand has grown and the manufacturing has not. The other reason is we didn't open imports in time. Now, Turkey has been offering to supply eggs, and as well as other countries. So Belarus has come up with suggestions, but that wasn't done on time. The decisions have been made, or they will be made in December, and the situation, no doubt, is going to improve. I really hope to see that, because we've had these conversations in the Ministry of Agriculture weeks ago. So I'm very sorry, and my apologies. This is a glitch in the work of the government, and they didn't open the imports in time because, well, somebody was expecting to make a profit of that. But I promise you that this situation will be fixed soon. Mr. Putin, utility prices have always been concerning our citizens, and many see this as unfair because pensions have been indexed by 7.5%, while utility tariffs have grown more. Dear Mr. President, in 2024, us pensioners are going to see an increase in pensions by 7.5%. At the same time, from June 2024, here in Novosibirsk, the authorities have scheduled a hike in utility prices in the range of 9 to 14%, which basically avoids the hike in pensions, the increase in pensions. So I suggest certain modifications to the governor's order. Well, I think, yes, Vladimir Leontiev was his name. So, Mr. Leontiev. So I will look into the figures, I will look into the tariffs in Novosibirsk, we'll take a look at that, we'll analyze the situation. Yes, indeed, the pensions will go up by 7.5%. I hope this is at least as high as the inflation rate. But what I'd like to draw your attention to is over the previous years, I think in December 2022, if I'm not mistaken, pensions were raised by 10%, 10+%. Then in spring, there was another raise, 4.5%, due to inflation. And in the beginning of the next year, there will be another 7.5% raise, while tariffs have not been raised since June last year. And utility tariffs will only be raised from June 2024. That is 1.5 years between indexations and tariff, while in the same period there have been 3 pension indexations by a total of 23%, I think. Of course, everything has to be done on time, and tariffs have to be raised eventually, softly, and citizens' incomes should grow accordingly. And there's another thing to pay attention to. There is a rule set forth by the law. If a household's expenses for utility bills exceed 22%, then the family is eligible for subsidies. And hundreds of thousands of people have used this opportunity last year, in 2022 and in 2023. In some regions, this threshold is lower still, not 20%, but if a household spends 15% or 20% of its income, they're already eligible for a subsidy. But let me say once again, we'll look into the ratio. Is it? There have been many questions about bank commissions being levied on community utility payments. I think this is unfair. The decision has been made. Pensioners will not pay commission on bank transfers related to utility payments. Let's talk about the Baikalo-Amursk Railway, the BAM. So, Amur region, Blagoveshchensk city, the gateway to China. Mr. Putin, the question is the following. Next year we will be celebrating the 50th anniversary of the construction project of the century, which is how they called the Baikalo-Amursk Railway. And now it's divided between the Baikalo-Amursk and the Far Eastern railways. don't you think it's time to get BAM back on the map of Russia? And there are projects like BAM-2 and BAM-3, extremely important for our country. What do you mean by getting BAM, Baikal-Amursk main line, back on the map of Russia? Well, previously it was the Baikal-Amur main line. Now part of the Baikal-Amursk main line is divided in two parts. And there's organization like the Baikal-Amursk mainline community. It's an organization that unites thousands of people across Russia, and they suggest recreating the Baikal-Amursk mainline from Taishet to Sovetskaya Gavань. Because many people believe that this will allow to accelerate the railway projects of BAM-2 and BAM-3 and generally give an impetus to railway construction in the far east of the country. In fact, this is the first time I've ever heard about this problem ever existing. Well, that way or another, it is still property of Russian railways, and a head of Russian railways has never told me that this problem ever existed. Well, still, I'm going to talk to him, and I'm going to talk to the Minister of Transport, Savelyev, and if they find it necessary to unite the two railways, then of course I see no problem here. This is up to Russian railways to come up with the initiative. Yes, I'll have a talk with them. I will have a word with the Minister of Transport and the CEO of Russian Railways. If it makes sense, then, of course, let them do it. This is the first time I've heard about this. But is this going to help new construction? I don't quite understand how it's going to help new construction in this regard. They're always bickering about who's going to build what. This is, well, Vice Prime Minister Husnulin is in charge of that, and I have a general idea of what's going on there. They're working in very difficult conditions there, but still, all goals will be achieved, and I promise I will look into that. It's just that it's the first time I've ever heard about this problem being a problem. But yes, we have to treat the BAM anniversary with respect. Yes, please, let's respect others here. Just see how many questions we have here. What about BRICS Tatarstan there? Artur Halilulov, Tatarstan. Mr. President, as we know, the BRICS summit is taking place in Tatarstan. Two questions in this regard. First, what effect the summit is going to have on the so-called rule-based world order? And the second question is the choice of Kazan as the hosting city. Is it related to the fact that Tatarstan is becoming sort of a diplomacy hub in relations with countries of the Muslim West? No, it's just because Tatarstan has been showing great development rates, and Kazan is one of the best examples of such development. They've created great conditions. The previous president and today's president, Minnikhanov, have been doing a great work, and the results are obvious. When I came to Kazan with Mr. Shaimiev, the previous president, we went to Kazan, and what I was happy to see is in early 2000s, we saw people living in earth houses. They were very primitive, but they were very clean and very well tended to, and I felt great respect to people living in very modest conditions, but still demonstrating a very high level of inner culture. That was amazing. And and I think this is the reason why Tatarstan is developing dynamically, as well as its capital city, Kazan. Infrastructure is well developed there.
Больше нравится слово хабом, пожалуйста, хабом. Но и Татар многонациональная, многоконфессиональная республика. Выстроены отношения между конфессиями должным образом.
Between the creeds, it is a good model for the rest of the country. So this is why we opted for this city. And with respect to the rules-based world order, these rules are inexistent because they change on a daily basis depending on political expediencies and immediate interests of some of the stakeholders. How shall that impact the situation? Well, things will develop in the right direction. It will demonstrate that there are very many forces in the world, very many powerful nations that want to live guided not by the unwritten rules, but rather, on the contrary, by the rules of the United Nations Charter and other statutory tenets, and being guided by the interests thereof and of their partners, without establishing military alliances, create the context for effective, mutually advantageous development. This will be at the heart of Russia's presidency in BRICS. What aircraft shall we use to fly to that summit? Because a heavy blow was dealt to the aviation and aircraft construction. In past years, you obliged Russian airlines to buy and purchase Russian aircraft, and now they are queuing to buy these. But still, we are now using foreign-made aircraft. Is it safe? Because any news about an air incident or accident cause outrage. And now a phone in from Maxim Saltykov from Moscow. Can you hear us loud and clear? Yes. Good afternoon, Mr. President. My name is Maxim. I'm a cadet of the aviation school, military school. What is to happen with our civil aviation in the current geopolitical context amid sanctions, and our airlines are not allowed to purchase foreign-made aircraft? MS-21 and IL-96-300 only being certified, and it will take a lot of years for them to be commissioned, and the lifetime of the currently operating aircraft is coming to an end. And another question, very few graduates come to work to our airlines, although we're trained for that. And in a nutshell, shall we fly in future, and what shall we use? What aircraft shall we use? We will definitely keep flying. With respect to foreign-made aircraft, Pavel has been correct in saying that we used to have disputes with our airlines that procured without any reasonable limitation too many of foreign-made airplanes. They had their own rationale because they cited the noise levels and the fuel consumption levels. Lots of arguments behind that, but probably it would have been better that proper market for Russian-made aircraft had been established. We have had some achievements, but our fleet is overloaded with foreign makes, and I think our companies acted correctly. They did not respond to the unlawful action on the part of the leasing companies and operators, but no one wants to lose money in part of these aircraft. We repurchase, we buy them back, and they become the property of Russian airlines. We also need to enhance our own capability in aircraft building. And I hope that all the plans of ours, and we have around 1,000 aircraft in the pipeline until 2030, MS-21, and re-equipping the current aerial vehicles with Russian-made engines, PD, and we should start manufacturing PD-35 engine with more powerful thrust, and we will have the opportunity to increase the number of long-range aircraft, including Il-96-400, which already is in operation, the cargo version of it. It's a bit longer, so we must work hard, and we have the potential to implement all our plans. I hope that we will deliver on all of the plans of ours, and we will have aircraft at hand for the pilots and passengers. And with respect to small scale or regional aviation, we also must develop that capability. A question from the room, from the hall. I saw New York Times. Please, will no, Lin Xinhua first, and then New York Times. Good afternoon, Mr. President. It's my pleasure to ask you a question. Xinhua Chinese news agency. Two questions to you. The first one, as we know, Russia is to preside in BRICS next year. What meaning, what importance does cooperation and coordination between BRICS and Russia and China in BRICS have? And what do you expect from the development of the Chinese-Russian ties next year? Well, we know. Please have a seat. We know, and I have to repeat, that our level of interaction with the PRC is unparalleledly high, and we hope to reach $200 billion of mutual trade next year. It's going to be on top $200 billion, even probably shortly this year, early next year. And in the first quarter, we will attain the $220 billion of bilateral trade. And the increase will be 31%. It was 31% last year, and the growth will be 30% this year. We have been pursuing our economic ties in various sectors steadily. We have been diversifying our ties. We have been developing infrastructure and bridge building and high-tech cooperation also, and we will act in this vein. And an incentive, an impetus was provided during the March visit paid by the President of China, Xi Jinping. And we agreed that we would develop relations in 8 main areas, and we signed the relevant documents. And the government of Russia and that of PRC started implementing our plans that we designed with my friend and a friend of our country, President Xi, actively. We have been working intensively, stably, reliably. As regards BRICS, well, I will not say anything new. This vector has been reinforced, and the Russian-Chinese ties are one of the main guarantors behind the global stability. We see what has been happening around Russia and China, and we see some attempts of the West to switch NATO eastwise, and that definitely is beyond their statutory scope. North Atlantic is called North Atlantic. Why do they want to come to Asia? Still they do. They're trying to instigate, incite the situation. They're establishing new political alliances and military alliances and with different makeups. Us in China don't do anything of the kind. We do cooperate in military sphere, in the economic and humanitarian sectors also, but would not establish any alliances, and our friendship is not meant against third countries. It's to benefit us, most importantly, not anyone, not being against anyone else. What we see from the West, well, they're trying to make friends against someone, and we have been watching that closely, and we will respond on time and effectively. There should be no doubts about that. And now, New York Times, as we promised, well, in the middle.
Газета New York Times.
New York Times, Gally Hopkins, for more than a year, Western correspondents and journalists could not attend such events, and I'm so glad that we can participate. It's all Peskov's fault. But let me please, I'm a democratic person. I'm a democratic man. Well, we'll be talking that, we'll be discussing that. Can I ask a question in English, please?
My colleague, Wall Street Journal correspondent Evan Gershkovich, has been held in Lefortovo prison without a trial for 37 weeks. His detention was today again, the extension on his detention was today again upheld. Paul Whelan, another U.S. citizen, has been in prison for nearly 5 years. A spokesman for the U.S. State Department, which considers both men wrongfully detained, recently said that Moscow had rejected what it called a substantial offer to return both of them to the United States. Is that true?
সম্মানিত দেশবাসী, আসছে 2024 বছরের শুরুতে সারা দেশে অনুষ্ঠিত হতে যাচ্ছে ভোট। এই ভোটে দলে দলে ভোট দিয়ে আপনার ভোটকে বাঁচিয়ে রাখুন। ভোটকে জয়যুক্ত করুন।
Newsbrief. মার্কিন প্রেসিডেন্ট জো বাইডেনের বিপক্ষে অভিশংসন তদন্তর পক্ষে মার্কিন কংগ্রেসে ভোট। যুক্তরাষ্ট্রের প্রেসিডেন্ট জো বাইডেন তার ছেলের ব্যবসায় অবৈধ ও বিতর্কিতভাবে যুক্ত। এই অভিযোগে বাইডেনের বিরুদ্ধে ইমপিচমেন্ট তথা অভিশংসন তদন্তের প্রস্তাব আনা হলো মার্কিন হাউস অব রিপ্রেজেন্টেটিভে। বুধবার এই প্রস্তাবের পক্ষে ভোট পড়েছে 221টি, বিপক্ষে 212টি। মার্কিন প্রেসিডেন্ট জো বাইডেনের ছেলের নাম হান্টার। তার ব্যবসা নিয়ে দীর্ঘদিন ধরেই নানান প্রশ্ন উঠেছে। বিতর্কিত সেই ব্যবসায় বাইডেনও যুক্ত বলে অভিযোগ উঠেছে। তার পরিপ্রেক্ষিতে বাইডেনের বিরুদ্ধে ইমপিচমেন্ট প্রস্তাব আনা উচিত, এমনটা দাবি উঠেছে।